Hi, everyone. You are tuning in to hear the Fix podcast, which was recorded yesterday, Thursday, March 20th. I interviewed three great coaches who discussed some of the serious implications of the crisis at hand. In full disclosure, as I was listening to my knowledgeable guests explain everything, I myself was learning at the same time. When we completed the recording and after digesting everything, I wanted to do and say more. For that reason, at the end of the podcast from yesterday, you will hear a segment that I am adding today, the day after the original recording, with a more thorough and complete plan for pitchers and coaches. I thank the genius of my guest panel for inspiring me. I hope I will inspire you as well, so stay tuned for that. Now here's the original podcast recording. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very important pop-up episode of The Fix. And before I introduce my special guest, I want to say something very important. We all know many people are suffering, and the intent of this podcast is not to imply that baseball should be at the top of your list in terms of taking care of yourself right now. Your health is number one. With that being said, I am concerned that if pitchers don't use this time wisely, they could very easily jump from one crisis to another, returning to play deconditioned and increasing their risk for injury. I will be sharing with you some of my ideas to keep our guys on track during these upcoming weeks. Let me introduce the guests I've invited to help with this topic. First, I want to introduce Ed Sprague, Director of Player Development for the Oakland A's. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
And Larry Owens, Head Coach for Bellarmine University. Welcome back, Larry.
Thank you, Angel.
And last but definitely not least, someone near and dear to me, Andy Tarpley, Head Coach for College Park High School.
Hi, Angel. Good morning.
Hi, Andy. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So, guys, the reason why I called you all to be on this show is because I've gotten so many calls from pitchers as well as parents, as well as coaches, worrying about what's going to happen when play resumes. And I was really concerned because my job is to head off things before they happen. That's what I do in my work. And I started becoming concerned about, okay, if this is just a 2-week thing, not too bad. But if it goes longer, what should I tell my pitchers to do? We don't want them throwing too soon or peaking too soon. What if they just laying around for 2 weeks being bummed out? What can we do? I was concerned. And as these dates started pushing on with terms of being in the house, et cetera, I started thinking, even though we have so many important matters at hand, this is really an issue. So I started thinking about, the reentry phase is going to be an important one. And I started asking myself some questions like, gee, I wonder if when they announce that we can resume sports, is there going to be a transition phase? Are games going to immediately start? And because one of the things I noticed, I laid out a calendar and I said, let's just say somebody shut down completely and they had no arm action at all, and then they're called back to play. So I laid out what would a calendar look like, given that they haven't been off for too long, maybe just, let's say 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. What would an aggressive calendar look like? And even with being aggressive and increasing pitch counts, starting at 25 and increasing them by 10% each time, it was a 6-week process. In the beginning of the 7th week, they would be at 79 pitches. So I started saying, so when baseball starts again, is there going to be okay, we can all go back to practice and the games will start in a month or 6 weeks? So Ed, I wanted to start with you because everything bounces off of Major League Baseball. What do you think about the way it's going to reenter? I know you can't speak on when you think it will reenter, although I know we'd love to all hear your opinion on it. But what do you think about that whole process of it ends, it starts, and then how it's going to be handled?
The problem is obviously, if you knew what the start date was, you could plan for it from a training standpoint. And of course, we don't have that start date. My personal opinion is, obviously the commissioner's office put out yesterday, I believe, that we won't have games any earlier than the 15th of May. I think it's going to be much longer than that. I went through the strike of 94, and so it was similar. We broke in August. thought we might come back. So guys were kind of in mid-season form, and they continued to go on that route until the season was eventually canceled. And then guys basically went to their normal off season with planning on, spring training. Of course, that didn't happen right away. When we did come back, we had about 2 weeks, which was a pretty aggressive timeline, but we were also dealing with pitchers that had kind of prepped themselves, knowing they were preparing for spring training and moving forward. So this is a little bit different. We had, from the pro standpoint, we had our guys built up to probably 2 and 35, at least pitchers on the mound, 2 up, 35 pitches, and now they've been shut down. We've given them a program to kind of continue on that. Starters have their program, but they're continuing with, their simulated games, 1 by 15 and then 2 days off, and then 2 by 35 with 3 days off. But with that being said, if this continues to go on and on and on, there's still going to be needed, I think, 2 to 3 weeks of some sort of spring training, because we haven't faced any games. At least the minor leaguers haven't. The big leaguers have played some, but then there's also going to be the external pressure to, when things are all clear, to get these big leaguers back in stadiums because of the revenue missed by the ownership. So there's a number of different factors that are going involved in this. I will guess that they will rush the process, but I think it'll be at least a 2-week time frame between the announcement of the opening day to when the spring trainings will begin.
Wow. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting challenge, which I will be giving some suggestions for, because right now, it would be great if everybody had access to being able to do their bullpens, especially if they're keeping the eye on the target that, okay, maybe things are going to start in May. And of course, we'll see how things occur. The good news is everybody recommends that you do be outdoors. So if pitchers still have that availability to get onto a mound and they can get a catcher that's willing to work, we could keep up with that. But it's a scary thought when you think that it might only be a few weeks, and that because of business, people are being rushed. So if those pitchers aren't doing the right thing right now, we could see a whole crisis happening. On your end, what are you thinking about all this? Is the college season completely over? I know, Andy, it's not over for high school yet, right? They haven't said no high school season.
That's correct. They haven't said that yet.
Okay.
It's coming.
Okay. And Larry, did you tell me the other day that once they called and canceled the College World Series, what does that mean actually? And are you over?
Yeah, we're done. Everybody, I don't know of any conference in the country that's playing. Everybody's done for the school year. Initially it was the NCAA that came out and halted championships and, started with the basketball championships, then it got to the spring sports championships at every level. And then the conferences followed suit because, there was maybe hope that the conferences wouldn't cancel and we could maybe play for a conference championship should things get better. But it was very unlikely, and it certainly hasn't happened. So all the colleges, we're done. So now our predicament is like anybody's. Whenever they say we can go play, you want to be as close to being able to play as possible. But you deal, like Ed alluded to, I think we do need a little time. While our guys are staying around, I don't know if it's possible for everybody to get up and remain at, above 75, 100 pitches or be prepared to, go deep into a ball game. I don't know if that's reasonable because you don't know how long they're going to have to maintain this, how long they're going to have to maintain that schedule. So what I do think is important that for our guys, the next possible time they could play, and, hopefully the collegiate summer leagues are going to kick off and going to be able to play. And that's our goal, would be for our players, in particular our pitchers, to be ready to go, because I think it's if anybody should shut down or what have you, I don't know if it's the best time in the world to do it. And I would be concerned that somebody would get hurt. So we want our guys to be ready to go out in the summertime. We just don't know. That's still kind of up in the air. Heck, things are getting canceled and pushed back. I live here in Louisville, Kentucky. They moved the Kentucky Derby. They canceled the Kentucky Derby till
wow.
September. And that's the first Saturday in May. Big league teams aren't going to start till mid-May at best. Ed alluded to that, that's maybe highly unlikely. When are the summer teams going to start? Summer teams are typically going to start in June, when school ends, and then they all start at different times. But that's in jeopardy. And if they don't play in the summertime, then I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what we do.
Do you historically, does a college coach, like at this time of the season, would you already be making connections with coaches in the summer saying, to the leagues that are out in the East Coast, would you be typically saying, okay, we've got, do you have room for this pitcher? We want this guy to go. I mean, is that planned at this time of the year? So in other words, right now, there's a date where college or summer ball usually starts and you already have pitchers placed.
That's done in the fall.
It's done in the fall.
Yeah.
So it's already been done.
Yes.
So most of your guys are going off to play summer ball. And go ahead.
Every one of our guys are taken care of. And in most cases, every now and then, and I'm sure it's the case with every school, there are some outliers and there are always, guys that still need to be placed. Things have evolved over the years so much that it's another predicament that this may help in some regard. It may not, I don't know. But there are so many college summer leagues out there now. They are constantly, and this is where the pitchers are at risk, they're constantly hunting for arms.
Right.
All the time. I mean, all the time. And that's where, what's the NCAA going to rule? The NCAA has already ruled at the Division II level at least, and I think at the Division III level that, and have openly said at all levels, or NCAA Division I, II, and III, that they're going to allow these guys to have a year of eligibility back. There's some other details that have to be ironed out at the Division I level because of roster limits, scholarship limits, and et cetera. But I'm trying to find our seniors a place to play should they be granted their eligibility and they want to come back and play. And in particular, I have a couple seniors, I have 3 senior arms that are draftable. If the draft were today, I think 2 are drafted. But then that gets, where Ed can certainly give more insight with when's the draft going to be. It is a mess, and it affects everybody top down.
Mm-hmm. Andy, have you heard with the high school season, with the schedule? So, for example, you have your schedule laid out through the end of June. So here in Pleasant Hill, we're hearing that you're going to be returning to school April 13th. We don't know that because we also hear some other possibilities of the school year ending. But let's just assume that April 13th you go back. That doesn't necessarily mean that the baseball season resumes. Is that correct? Or are they connected together? If one goes, the other goes?
So far, NCS, which is our big division for baseball, hasn't made that decision yet. But April 13th is the absolute earliest day the kids would return to school. So with that implied, if you will, we wouldn't start baseball, I would say, until May. Kids graduate in June. So it's along the lines that you were talking about earlier. How are these players going to be ready for competition, especially if they try to mash that entire season into 4 weeks or 3 weeks? It can't be done.
Yeah, so actually,
we don't know yet.
I was going to ask you. So when you you have a schedule in front of you. I have your schedule too.
Right.
Is it like, okay, there's a game scheduled for tomorrow, let's jump on that and then we just continue? Or is it we continue, but we also have extra games filled in? In other words, because I don't know how this works, is there a numbers game here where in order to see who's in first place, second place, whatever, you all have to have played so many games and so you're trying to get them all in? Or does it work to just say, hey, let's just resume the schedule wherever it's at? How would that be done?
I would assume, and I don't know, I'm speculating, but I would assume that all non-league games would be canceled at that point and everybody would condense their season into just league. And at that point, I believe all the league coaches would probably get together and try to figure out a 3, instead of a 2-game-a-week schedule, a 3-game-a-week schedule, and try to condense it to figure out who a league champion would be. And then they would go into a postseason playoff after that based on how you did in league. That would be my best guess.
Okay, so I know Ed mentioned the business aspect, and Larry's they're not playing. But with high school, Andy, when you mentioned getting together with the coaches, like all the league games, can you guys make the decision and say, okay, we just got back. We've been on this shelter in place thing here. So people weren't all able to get out and keep their arms healthy. And, and I'm more concerned about pitchers than anyone because it's a different skill. And we have to be really concerned about them. And especially now, their season's starting with the highest competition in the sense of now we're playing for the championship all of a sudden. You haven't even had a chance to unwind yourself. Do you
Right.
coaches have that capability of saying, hey guys, we just got let out of jail yesterday. Let's negotiate how many weeks we wait and how many practices we can have before we actually play our first game. Is that something you guys have latitude to do, or is somebody higher than you possibly not having the knowledge we all have on the personal level, but who makes that decision?
I would think that the athletic directors would get together.
Okay.
The athletic directors would get together, and I would hope they would consult with us coaches to find out what's best for the players and the programs. Because
Yes.
sometimes they don't, they deal with all sports and they don't understand that we, quote unquote, have valuable cargo. So we have
Right.
to take care of these players like you're talking about. We don't want to
Right.
thrust our two best pitchers into competition and extend their pitch counts when they're not ready for that. So that'd be something I would advise to my athletic director. So it is looking bleak.
Yes, exactly. I'm curious, as everyone is, tell me about the draft. I want to know about the scouts who use this time to go see people. Do they already have a list? Does that just go by the wayside? What actually happens right now with those seniors that were hoping to show that, you showed them some interest? They were hoping to show that kind of performance to possibly get drafted. Tell us about the draft, the intake, and how all that's going to go.
They have their lists. I mean, starting early as the end of last year's draft, all of our amateur scouts are out there, doing the summer circuit, whether it's area code games or the perfect games, Team USA. So on the high school side, following all those players, and then of course on the college side as well, seeing kids in the Cape Cod League or the Northwoods League. So there's a preliminary follow list that each scout would turn in, right? And then come springtime, as you get your list of players that have been turned in by the scouts, and there's a follow list, and you start to go write reports on these guys. So obviously we have the follow list, and then we have very limited follow-up reports that we would use to evaluate the players in the springtime. So that there was no season, potentially no college season, or collegiate summer league season, then that would be interesting how the draft would work. So, I think at this point, I have no answers definitely, but I would think that the draft at this point would probably be pushed back until late July, early August to allow, if the baseball does resume, you have the collegiate summer leagues playing, you have high school, circuits going on, that some of these players could continue to show their skills. So it's kind of twofold. One, we have reports on players that maybe our guys saw last year that are really good. And so those guys don't devalue themselves because they haven't been seen.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, there's guys that usually come out of nowhere or get seen because you go in to see one player on a team who's got a nice report on him, and you see somebody else and you write a report on him. So it's going to be a big guessing game. The draft always is anyway. We draft a lot of players. I would also think that they would limit the draft probably to maybe 20 rounds. That's kind of already been talked about anyway. Some MLB wanted to move the draft back for next year anyway. They've wanted to limit it to 20 rounds. I'm sure if you've been following it, they've been, trying to eliminate up to 42 minor league teams, essentially eliminating short season. That's been on the works for next year, and that negotiation between the minor leagues, the major leagues, has been ongoing. So this could affect all of that. But my guess would be there's no way we could hold a draft reasonably in June at this point, because then even if you drafted players, you'd have nowhere to send them if the season hadn't started. So my guess is the first time drafted players would come into your camp would be an instructional league in September.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you where would you put the players that you would draft? Your minor league system, you take them in and then you put them in their appropriate place, and then you bring in the new guys, and you wouldn't be doing that sort of thing right now, correct? Because the minor leaguers haven't been playing. You don't really know their status. Is that how that goes?
We have an issue, even like the draft happens in June. We usually take about 2 to 3 weeks with our college pitchers before they even are allowed to pitch in a game, because some of them may have pitched through the College World Series. Maybe some of them ended in the regular season. And so we got to get all that information after their physical and then build them up appropriately and then send them out either to the short season league or keep them at the complex in Arizona and play down there in the AZL, which we have 2 teams. So it's going to be interesting because we now have probably just the right amount of players, given that nobody would get hurt from a pitching standpoint. So even without a draft in June, fielding enough potential pitching staffs for our short season teams could be challenging, especially if they keep our Latin American players away for another extended period of time. So there's a situation where we could resume baseball, but it also be a situation where the travel ban remains in effect, and we would have up to 50 or 60 Latin players that may not be allowed to come back in the country, which would affect rosters as well. So it's going to be extremely challenging, we won't know how all that unfolds until it unfolds.
Exactly.
Angel and Ed, I have a comment or an observation about, Ed commented that if they do push the draft back to, even if it gets into August, that, then a problem that it may present would be colleges start, mid-August. So if you take the seniors are non-issues, they would be a good move for them. But the juniors, that would present a problem, because then you'd have kids that potentially were maybe already enrolled in school, depending on when the draft is, or have a very limited window, a very small window to decide, I'm going to sign and go play. I think that just is an example of, man, this creates there's so many variables with this. It's not, I don't know if there is going to be a good decision. I don't know. It's going to be crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah. And from go ahead, Andy, was that you?
It was not, but
okay.
Trickle down. It's just the trickle down effect. I'm just thinking and listening to everything everyone's saying. It is crazy.
Yes. So the format of how everything is going to transition, we know is up in the air. But now we still have this issue of what do we do? Because the more I'm hearing all of this, what it does sound like is that everyone, as much as we right now might want to sit here and say, hey, we would like 4 weeks to transition or blah, 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 that's not going to happen. Because by the time that time comes, we're all going to be sitting here with bated breath like racehorses trying to get out of the gate. And so my guess is that we have to assume that we're not going to have the amount of time we would like to have with our pitchers. And of course, this goes for players too, but this show is about pitching. The amount of time we have with our pitchers to do all the things that will be necessary. And by the way, I have a question before I get on to what the pitchers could be doing. Ed, and actually all of you, do you think that this is going to trickle into a different way of using pitchers in the game at the beginning of the season because of lack of the usual preparation? The coaches are usually able to lay their eyes. You guys lay your eyes on your pitchers. So you might have a way you do rotations, but you have one guy who you might say, you know what, he's shaky, he hasn't pitched, but he's good. So I'm only going to put him in for 2 innings instead of letting him go for 5 or 6 innings. Do you think that there's going to be some general change because arms aren't conditioned? I know with you, Ed, there's this business aspect. And of course, they're professionals. And of course, you know what? The professionals maybe have their own bullpens in their yard and they have their own guy they can come over. So we may not even be dealing with this issue. But what do you think on a college and a high school level? Do you think this is going to impact the way things are done or change things temporarily at least?
Well, I think it's going to change. Certainly at the professional level, we have the ability. We also have the numbers too. So in theory, we have the number of pitchers that these guys won't pitch more than what they're ready for. So if it's 2 and 35 or 3 and 45, they just won't do it. Now we can expand rosters, which I would guess would happen at the minor league level and probably the major league level as well for the short period of time. You could also at the minor league level, you could shorten games to 7 innings because it really doesn't matter at the minor league level. But there will be definitely changes. Our pitchers will not. We barely get them past 3 and it's 4 and 65 maybe to start the season anyway with all of our pitchers. We don't do no back-to-back days out of the bullpen for at least 2 months. We already have all these rules and regulations in place, at least for our organization. But the problem I see at the college level and the high school level is they just don't have the numbers to do that. So, if you only have so many pitchers on your team that can pitch, and so if you're trying to be smart and use your guys at only 2 ups or 3 ups, you're going to run out of pitching. And especially if you try to get back to 3 games a week, you're not going to have enough time to do it. And so that would be the issue. And if I was a high school senior that already was going to college somewhere, I would probably, to do the smart thing, is I wouldn't even pitch. I would tell my coach, sorry, I'm not going to pitch. I'm done. I'm just going to train and get ready for the college season next year. So you're going to have that issue too. You're going to have guys not necessarily quitting, but why would you risk trying to rush back for a high school if you already got a scholarship to go to play in college somewhere? So I could see that issue being a problem already too. So I think the high school level is going to run out of players, run out of pitchers, and I think that would college as well. But for the college season, they're pretty much shut down, I would think. So they're just trying to prep now to get themselves drafted. Or if I was a college pitcher, I would probably just use the time off to just train and maybe build up going to next fall.
Right. Good point. Larry, you have anything on that?
From the college pitcher in general, and it's not every single college pitcher, but most are getting ready. They have summer commitments. And so now what scares the heck out of me is how are they going to take care of our arms when I can't foresee any arm coming out of this and being ready, even given 2 weeks and being ready to throw, pitch 6 innings to get deep into a ball game. I mean, I don't think they're going to be ready to do that. I think they'll theoretically be ready to throw, 1 or 2, like Ed talked about 2 and 35, 1 and 20, 1 and 25, whatever you put on them. But sometimes you got to really trust who you're sending the players to, because a lot of times they're younger guys, inexperienced guys. They want to win, and they don't always put the health of the pitcher first. So you're a little leery to begin with to send them out. But that's my concern. I want to make sure our guys are ready to go pitch in the summertime, and then you want to have conversations with the guys running the teams to make sure that you feel comfortable with how they're going to use your players. High schools, I think, are kind of in the same boat, except the high school coaches are going to have a little more say-so over, a little more, make better decisions maybe with their players. But then you run into the risk of, like what Ed talked about, where are all these kids going to work out? Some of them just simply don't have the means or the places to face it. I can't face hitters. I don't have a mound to throw off of. I can't get on my high school field.
Exactly.
All the city parks are shut down. College fields are shut down. Where are they going to do it? So it's kind of, I don't know. My concern initially was, when I talked to you about this, was they can't, if they're going to pitch anytime soon or anytime this summer or before, they have to be ready, and they can't just not do anything. They can't shut down, because if they shut down, they're going to.
Exactly.
That's just based on my experience on the minor league side. That was, like Ed talked about it earlier, when a lot of times guys get done playing, the D2 guy's done in the 1st of May. He didn't make the playoff. They didn't make the playoff. They go to the NCAA tournament. They're done the 1st of May, and you draft them in the 25th round. They show up. When was the last time you pitched? It's June, whatever. Well, it was, the 1st of May. God, you're not ready to go. We open up June 25th. How are you going to be able to pitch? So you got to get those guys ready. This is a tough deal. And I just think this is great that you're doing it to make everybody aware that there's subtly different challenges at each level, but they need to do something. And it's going to vary a little bit, but they need to do something.
Yeah, I have some kind of cool
scenario.
Go ahead, Ed.
A scenario also that there could be an opportunity for some sort of national combine that brings all of the draftable college players together, and as well as the high school players together. And if you did that, you would have enough pitching and position players to be able to play games that you wouldn't have to stretch these guys out. So they could come in like an area code game situation where they're just coming in for 1 inning or 2 innings max. Players can get at bats. All the scouts would be there in one spot to see these guys. And if that happens, they would, they could set a date maybe a week before the draft where they'd fly everybody to this one spot. And that, at least if you had a date, that would give players an opportunity to train themselves for that date. And I think that would be helpful.
Wow, that is a genius idea. Do you guys as coaches have input to create these kinds of things? Like Ed, you were just brainstorming, but go ahead.
It's a combination of general managers, scouting directors, obviously MLB, getting that all pulled off. I mean, so there will be input. There's going to be a lot of talk about the draft once we figure out anything else. And so I'm sure all of these ideas will be shared. Everybody will have different ideas on how they want to do it. But it makes more sense than to chase these guys around these collegiate summer leagues for 3 or 4 weeks, as opposed to just bring them all to one spot.
Yeah.
Whether that's in Cary with the USA complex or one at the one of the spring training complexes in Florida or Arizona to allow everybody just be in one spot.
And a lot of the guys, and Ed can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, there are already on many of these guys, there are already guys have reports turned in on them. It's just there may be guys they need to see a little bit more, or maybe I didn't get to see the kid at XYZ school, and it gives them an opportunity. But if I'm not mistaken, I know I saw a lot of guys. There are a lot of reports turned in, but they're certainly not as many as they'll need to conduct a full draft, because hell, the high school seasons, they didn't even get to see a lot of the high school kids. So
yes,
it's going to be a really,
Correct.
but I think the combine thing would be it'd be really good. Absolutely. It'd be great for them to see them all at one time. It would stink that they would get to see them maybe a limited view, but chasing them for 3 weeks would be a difficult challenge as well. But I think that's a good idea.
Andy, I want to ask you about the predicament here in California, there's so many great junior colleges that have baseball that it's become quite popular for pitchers to want to go to the JUCO for 2 years and then go on to their school of choice, and just to get innings in, et cetera. And I know that happens a lot with our boys out here. And I'm curious if junior college is on halt with school, and it's a funny thing about junior college with eligibility and stuff. So let's say everyone stays in place on the team. The freshmen are still freshmen and the sophomores haven't left yet because they have extra eligibility. Does that create sort of a closed door to the guys who were going there? Because I know it's a voluntary thing, because I know that the JCs can't offer you scholarships and things. How does that work, Andy? And is that going to affect your team in a big way?
Well, probably not my team. It's a really good question. I don't even think the junior colleges know yet how they're going to handle this. A junior college is such a good option for a lot of these guys that aren't necessarily the most academic and really want to pursue baseball, because it keeps their options open. They can get drafted if that's, something that they want to do after, 1 year at a junior college, or 2 years, where, the bigger schools that's more of a part of your career, 3-4 years, and you've got the academic and everything else that comes with the university, with the education. So I actually have a lot of JC candidates this year. Like, my team is not that loaded. We're pretty young. So I'm going to have to get back to, I don't know. I haven't been contacted. I know that, the JCs have just been out recently, just starting to look at our guys and show me interest in, where is this guy going to go? Is this guy, even the JCs fight for your players, if you will. So that process has all just started, because those coaches are all, working on their seasons right now. But on their off days, they're starting to come down to the high schools and talk with us. So I got to assume it's going to affect the JCs just like it affects the bigger schools. Well, if I've got all these guys that retain a year of eligibility, what do I do with all my incoming freshmen when I have a very limited roster? I mean, somewhat limited anyway, but realizing you can only play 9 at a time. So it's going to create a problem at that level as well.
So everything I'm hearing, we know we've got a big issue going on. And again, getting back to the whole issue of, so regardless of any of what happens, whether it's a combine or whether it's we've got 2 weeks notice and we're back at play, whatever that is, we are still right now in this time when pitchers are at home. Most of the country is, I don't know if it's most of the country, but I know that huge part of the country is shutting down. Here in California, we have to stay in the house, and that's why people were calling me about different ways to handle this. So what I did is, I have to come at things from a different perspective. So I said to myself, okay, what is it that I always wish for? What I always wish for with one of my pitchers is that I had time where he wouldn't feel like he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, to maybe build or develop something on him that is a weakness. It is a place where he sometimes has chronic pain. If I were just looking at this like this isn't happening on a global level, but if a pitcher comes to me and he's got a problem, I'm always saying, geez, I wish you didn't have to face hitters right now, or I wish you weren't pitching right now. And so I said to myself, one of the things that has to happen with pitchers who are, regardless if they're still throwing pens or not, and of course, there's many ways to make pens happen, but aside from that, and because they're not on a schedule, meaning hey, I've got to face hitters in 2 days. So then we have to think, well, we can't get his arm sore from training because he's got to pitch. We're not on that kind of schedule. In other words, when you have a schedule that you can create where you can insert training to take the place to occur because of the needs of whatever your body has instead of the needs of the team, you're always in a positive place. And while we know that we're going to be under we have a lot of issues here with how do we get our guys to be in shape when they return, I can tell you that if you know of a weak link in a pitcher and you take care of that weak link, whether it be on a body part that he consistently has trouble with, or maybe that he just recently had trouble with at the beginning of the season. One of the things I've been saying to everyone is, listen, coaches, you guys have a way to create a menu for what you want your guys to work on right now. If you consider this to be a gift in disguise, where you can take every player or every pitcher and say, you know what? We want you to stay in shape, but we want you to do what I call weak link training, because we all know you're only as good as your weakest link. So, and the beauty of this is that the season started. So your guys came back in what supposedly would be their best shape. They've been off, they were in preseason, and now then you scrimmaged, and then you started playing and competitively league playing. And you already have seen your pitchers probably a number of times. And what I'm recommending to coaches to do is to use the information to sit down with each pitcher in mind and say, what didn't I like? What pitch wasn't working? What were his misses? Where was he complaining? Where was he putting ice? Why did he have to go see the athletic trainer 6 times? What to look at, not the guy who's laid out on the DL, but the guy who was performing, because every pitcher has a weak link. And one of the things is, if you take a good pitcher, people ask me, what do you do when you have a pitcher who's already doing well? And I say, I look for the one little tiny place where he's not doing as well as he could, and this could be mechanics, or where he's not using a joint correctly, a muscle correctly. Something looks funny. He doesn't use his leg correctly. Or when he tells me where he gets sore after pitching, it's in a place where he shouldn't be getting sore. So I go to those places, or asking him, hey, have you had surgery? Where did you have surgery? Because there are weak links that are all over the pitcher's body. He can never talk about it. He never has time to work on that detail. And off season is still a crazy time for pitchers. They're off, but they want to take some time off, but then they're still getting ready. They're still in mode. The mode they're in right now is completely different, but they're nervous. And if we can convince our pitchers that by taking their very weakest link and making it better, regardless if they've been pitching or not, they're going to return to you a better pitcher. So you're having pitchers return better doesn't always just mean, okay, he was conditioned to 79 pitches, and now he's telling me he's thrown only 1 pen. We know how to handle that, because that's a numbers and a calendar game. But what can happen is, if that pitcher returns to you and, hey, coach, my forearm was getting tight after every outing, and now look at it, it's huge, it's not hurting anymore. You have actually brought a pitcher back in better shape. And so I think one of the most important things is for us as coaches to wrap our brains around having a different mindset about how we're going to use this time. We know what we can't do easily, but what we can do is look individually at our pitchers and see, where is it that he could be making some progress? And, all my pitchers that are calling me now, I have pitchers that some guys are saying yay because they were pitching in pain. And now they want to train and get that part better. Now we have the issue of the gyms being closed out here. Are the gyms closed by you, Larry?
Absolutely.
Because my client from Tennessee is still training in a gym.
Yeah, the gyms, restaurants, everything is shut down. Yeah.
Okay. So what pitchers have to do is they have to do what they can in their homes to improve. And the thing they should be improving is the thing one on the list is anything that bothers them from pitching, any body part, because the body's talking all the time. Anything that maybe they don't talk about, but you as a coach know, because a guy's got it, after every outing, he's got 10 bags of ice on his forearm or something that you notice. But there is a way to do what's called priority training. Now, you have to have some dumbbells, and then you have to know what exercise to do. But guess what? Most people have dumbbells at home, and if they don't, you can order them. And you don't need to order 50-pound dumbbells, and you don't need to order pairs. But one of the important things to create the idea and then make the pitcher make it happen is that he find one body part and that he priority train that. And what does that mean? It's a technique that's used in bodybuilding, and it is something where you decide what is the part that you're focusing on. But I use it in a sort of a different way. I use another technique called staggered sets, where you are literally every day doing something for that one body part, so that when your day begins, you've got one exercise that's your exercise for that day, and you do 4 sets of it in the morning. So let's say it's your biceps in trouble. So you pick an exercise for your bicep, or let's say a guy's got medial elbow pain. And there's nothing really wrong, but he's always hurting and the MRI is clean. So you go, okay, he's got to build the outside of his elbow to support that inside weakness, because that's probably what's wrong anyway. So he says, okay, I'm going to do hammer curls every day. The other guy's saying, okay, I've got to do dumbbell curls because my arm is so sore in the bicep from decelerating. And then every day they get up in the morning, they eat their breakfast, and then they knock 4 sets out of the exercise of the day, just one exercise. Then they leave that dumbbell laying around, and every time they walk by it, they pick it up, do it again, of course, both arms, lay it down, and the next day they pick a different exercise for that same part. And they're going to be able to go probably 15, 16 days before they just kind of forget to do it because they need a break, and then they resume again. What ends up happening then is you have a pitcher who's working on something weak, and he's also devoting a little bit of attention to something specific. This is not a time to think about getting stronger unless you are going into a gym. If you have a gym at home, or there is some gym that's open and you're going, you can't think strength right now. You have to think rebuilding tissue. And the way you rebuild tissue is through high repetitions, not working on strength. So if a pitcher has a 20-pound dumbbell and he's doing hammer curls and he ends up doing 20 of them, trust me, there's a way to make that 20-pound dumbbell feel heavier. But if he's doing that every day on that one body part, he's going to, within 4 days, he'll be feeling something completely different because he won't get sore from it, but he will be remodeling it in a way that makes his weak link one of his stronger links. That's one very important method that every pitcher needs to do. And for the high school coaches that have called me and said they're trying to keep their guys working out, they've asked me, well, what should I be thinking when I work with them? You should be thinking remodeling the tissue, making them do, because there's no way to think strength. This is kind of like an off season, but to acquire strength in the scientific way, you have to have tons of plates and dumbbells with heavy weight. But with a 20-pound dumbbell or a 25-pound dumbbell or a 15-pound dumbbell or one of each, you can get a workout with 4 sets of one exercise. The next day, you pick a different exercise for that same muscle. So you're attacking it in a different way. And I guarantee you, and the reason why I can guarantee it is it just so happens I decided to try this. And I've been doing one body part, one exercise every day. I'm in my 3rd week of it. I actually decided to do it for Lent. I was going to add in triceps every day just as a joke to myself. And it's really been an interesting journey. And it's how I know that this works. So that is one of the first things. And coaches, look at what you think. Look at his medical history. Look at what he complains about, or to call him and ask him and decide on one thing that you want him to do every day. So you know something's getting done. So that's one thing. Now, does that make sense to everyone?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah. So the body parts that are most vulnerable on a pitcher. So for all you coaches, and I actually would love for every coach that's listening to this to have their pitchers listen to it, because they're going to be able to follow this because they understand. So the parts that are going to respond the best to priority training, and this needs to be something they do. I have a few other things too. This is just the beginning. They need to just boom. This is what I'm doing. I want my re-entry. I want to go back with huge forearms, and I want to go back with huge biceps. They have to pick one thing that's their priority training. It doesn't mean they won't be doing other workouts, but this one thing. The parts that have to be considered the most would be, first of all, if a guy's had an injury on his medial elbow, he needs to think wrist and forearms. If he has soreness in his forearm, he needs to think forearm rotations. If he has problems in his upper arm, he needs to think biceps or triceps. So the body parts that respond the best to this and that really are the safest would be wrist, forearm, biceps, and triceps. And actually, when I say biceps, I should say elbow flexors, because that includes muscles on the upper arm and the outside of the arm that bend the elbow. But by changing the exercise, you recruit one of them preferentially. And by the way, to anybody out there that needs more information, all you have to do is email me and I will call you and I will send you pictures. In fact, if you say exercises for the elbow flexors on Google, you'll probably get all that you need. But I'm here with many resources for giving away to people to help them get through this. So coaches, I want you, when you, especially at the high school and college level, some guys are self-starters and some are not, and they need direction. So the other thing is, this is a perfect time for pitchers to be running. So all my pitchers, I'm creating programs for them, and I will put these in order at the end. So the other thing is, one of the things that the major leagues requires is that when the guys return, I'm talking minor league system, when they return, they need to be in shape. So they need to be able to run. And so what I do is I ask, well, what does your coach have you do? And then that's what we do in the off season. They do that running so that when they show up, they're in shape. They should be doing that now. So I've been listening. I listen to the news all day. Going out into the air is good, as long as you're keeping, 6 feet of distance. Obviously, if they have a catcher and they're on a mound, this is going to be perfect since we're a 60-foot business. But them to go out and run, they can do it alone. And to be running not distance, but to be running 40s, 60s, and sometimes hundreds for fun. But if they're running 60s, then that they're able to do everything they have to do in field. I mean, it's a perfect time for them to use running to stay in shape, unless they're recovering from a hamstring injury. So you've got two things that they can do. And by the way, this training is so minimal, they need to do it every day and maybe take Sundays off, just like they would if they were in spring training, if I think that's the way it goes. But this is minimal. And what it does is it keeps them dedicated in a direction. Now, the last thing, or it's not the last thing, but the other thing is that my first pitch strike warm-up program is one of the best programs on the market. And this is when science ends up being in the driver's seat. As you know, listening to the news, if it wasn't for the scientists that know how to collect data, know how to measure things, know how to do things, we would really be in trouble. So scientists right now are the rock stars. The cool thing about my program is it was done scientifically. It was a project that I came up with as a kinesiologist to analyze every joint movement and to create an exercise. And it ended up being so good that the guy said, we love this, make it a program, and it's been around for a long time. So this too, I am offering to donate on YouTube. I have a private channel on YouTube, and I'm offering that anybody who contacts me at angel@gymscience.com, they will get that link and then the pictures. If a pitcher does this program, it's 26 movements that take about 7 minutes, and it's a resistance band. If they do this every day, when they return to throwing, whenever that might be, they will not know that they didn't throw. And I can guarantee that this is a true statement because it's using every joint, and the way it's used, it just doesn't have the force. But because of the range of motion and the way the exercises are put together, it's like throwing without throwing and also not throwing forcefully, which means if they layer 4 weeks of this, when they return to play, it'll be seamless. How does that sound?
Love it. Thank you, Angel. Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Of course. Yes.
So we've got arm range of motion. We've got running. We've got priority training, an injury or a weak link that either you have talked to your player and said, this is what I think you should think about, or he determines for himself. And then, of course, there's other things that pitchers should do. So to all your pitchers out there that are listening, and I hope you get the pitchers to listen to this. So pitchers, even if you don't have dumbbells, there are a few movements that you can do without weights. See, I'm not a fan of just doing sissy movements and just saying, I'm going to work out at home, so I'm going to take soup cans. No. If it's not serious and it's not going to get the job done, don't even waste your time. But if you're at home and you are wanting to do a few things that are important, and this may also be part of a priority training thing, incline push-ups are one of the best exercises for pitchers. Every pitcher needs to be doing an incline push-up as his chest routine because it works the part of the pec that brings the ball down. Secondly, the chest and lat are both working, and they're your major accelerators. Plus, you have tremendous rear delt emphasis, and this is an exercise that is so easy to do at home because everyone's got a kitchen counter, everyone's got an edge to a dining room table, and everyone's got an edge to a couch. And this is a very important movement to consider when you're at home and you've got some dumbbells and you're doing some things. This should be added. And then what you're doing, and you can use this as priority training, saying, you know what? I'm working right now on the parts of my chest that actually enhance acceleration. And you can look at it that way. And so knowing things about exercises that connect with mechanics and that connect with the strength needed in the direction are so important right now. Now, this list can go on, so I want to invite anybody who needs information about this to contact me, and I would be more than happy to go over possibilities. But for anybody who's coming off of an injury, who has any soreness, you would be absolutely crazy not to use this time to improve that one thing so that you bring a better body back to the team, regardless of when that is. Does that sound good, guys?
Really good, Angel. Good stuff. Very good.
So the other thing, I had a coach ask me, what did I think about drills? And so here's the issue with drills. First of all, this is how we use drills in instruction. Okay, let's start with the regular situation. Drills are only good to transfer some information, give the pitcher feel, and they're feel guys, so they got to feel something, to isolate something, but then you have to automatically get back to the real deal. Because otherwise, all you've done is have them do something that doesn't integrate with the real thing, and it becomes a thing of in and of itself. So in other words, having a pitcher just practice his motion, if he's just there practicing his motion, he's not working on anything specific, it doesn't really make sense. And also, it kind of gets boring. If he's doing a bullpen in an hour, that's cool. If he's going to be pitching tomorrow, that's cool. But for the pitcher to use this to substitute doesn't work. But here's what does work when it comes to mechanics. And there are specific skills in mechanics that are required to be able to move efficiently. And the pitcher who can't follow through correctly because he doesn't have a strong enough back, or the pitcher that you see him when he gets to the top of his knee lift, he looks like he's just doing something crazy because it just looks off to you. Those are probably the two positions that you can have pitchers work on in a very specific way during a time like this, where because they require a certain type of strength, and that type of strength is developed very easily when you take a position and hold it. So having a pitcher be in a correct follow-through position, for example, with the rear leg up, the back's in a perfect extension position, those are the kinds of movements, that and at the top of the knee lift that requires a sort of a single leg balance. Those are probably the only two movements that respond to a constant holding of a position or a repeating of the position. So those are two very important things. So when you're thinking of your pitchers, if he's got a funky follow through, develop and create something for him. And again, I'm here for a resource for any of this, something to create that follow through position so that he comes back with a better follow through. And the body will have learned it. He doesn't have to integrate it. The body will have learned it. So any player you have right now, and when you have a bad follow through, you are at the greatest risk of injury. But the other thing is, if he doesn't know where he's supposed to get and how he's supposed to look when he gets there, it means he did something wrong in between. So you're probably fixing part of his motion as well. So the follow through position, I want you to picture all the pitchers you know in your life and say, you know, that guy really looks bad there. I've got a solution for it. You just have to contact me and I will send it to you. Same thing if he looks funky at the top of his knee lift and you think, yeah, that's what's causing all his problems. He's crazy up there. That's another kind of movement that is very easy to train. And when you've got pitchers that, you know, they drop their arms, recommend to them, hey, this is the time for you to focus on shoulder training because your arms can't stay up at 90 degrees. And when you drop your arm, you get under the ball, blah, 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 tell them your whole story. But these are the kinds of things you can give to a pitcher to focus during this time. And this is, of course, mostly relevant for high school and college. Hopefully, the major league pitchers will have their own ability to be working on their entire skill the way they do all year. But these are some essential tips. And I think it's going to be up to us coaches to give these guys these ideas.
No doubt.
Yes.
That's good stuff, Angel. The thing is, like, if a lot of the colleges or heck, some of the high schools here in Kentucky, we can't work out with our kids. We can't work with them. Everything they do is on their own. I mean, it may be a simple phone call and give them some advice on what to do, but I mean, we can't even work with them.
Yes. Well, I think I think it's essential that that coaches do that.
Absolutely.
I really do. I think it's a time. So here's what because I of course have the luxury. I work one-on-one with pitchers, so I know all of them really well. All of you have teams. You know them as well. But these are my personal clients that, you know, they rely on me for everything. So I, you know, took out each file and I looked at it and literally have it in my head anyway and said, okay, what one detail? So the goodies are in the details. That's something we all know, anybody who works with performance. The smaller the detail, the more important it is to the overall motion. And unfortunately, the details are what create a success. For example, the detail of what the finger is doing is going to create a successful pitch or not. There's a particular finger for each pitch that has to do a certain thing. So who sits around saying, gee, let me do something every day for my fingers. Let me do something every day for my wrist. But listen, if your grip isn't right on the ball, so this is a perfect time, and it sounds so crazy, but if you get it ordered systematically where they're not just doing that, they've got like 4 things they have to do: arm care, band work, priority training. You're going to do this exercise every day. You're going to run every day. If you put something together like that, it feels like a lot of things. And I think that details get lost, and I think this is a time to look at each pitcher individually, call them and make some suggestions to them, and then order it. So my guys have a systematic order that they're doing things. They wake up, they do the priority thing, which we already decided. Then they said, okay, well, then after that, I want to go run. I go, okay, that sounds good. Then I'm going to eat. And then, okay, and you know what? I've got some weights at home. I'm going to then do a little workout program, and then I'm going to do my homework. That's how they're doing it. And so we get it organized, and all of a sudden they feel like they're doing something. And I think that's important. Is everyone going to bite on this? No. but the guys that will appreciate it. But I think it's something we as coaches have to at least try to stimulate that thought. Plus, we'll be the benefactors of it because they'll return to us with something that's better, but they can't get deconditioned.
No doubt. No doubt.
Right. For sure.
Yes. Hey, so Andy, I know what a creative coach you are, and so many of my audience is made up of high school coaches, and I know they have questions, and I would love to know, what is your take on everything? How are you handling all the issues that are really, it's kind of different for high school players, I think. So I'm just wondering, as an expert coach like you are, what is the way you're looking and thinking about this, and what's your focus going to be? What would you say you're going to do, and maybe give some other coaches ideas?
Well, thank you for that. Gosh, we've been brainstorming a bunch on this because this is obviously really new for everybody. But for me, the hardest part, obviously this show is, revolves around, pitching and pitching health and maximizing mechanics. And for me, it's tough to get, from a hitting standpoint, just a baseball coach standpoint, the live competition. It's so tough to simulate in a practice environment, so, and, with everyone having to, sort of work out on their own, I don't know if people are going to be allowed to hit in cages with another player. I figure that's farther than 6 feet apart. So, I'm encouraging our guys as much live batting practice as possible and putting yourself in game-like situations as much as possible, because, you can practice and practice and practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have success in a game. So it's the mental reps that I feel are really, really important. And at a time like this where you can't get as many mental reps, these players have been conditioning themselves all winter, all fall, for this very condensed high school season where every game means everything. And so trying to get those reps in, for me, is what we've been basically brainstorming. I think with what we were talking about earlier, with what we are able to get out of this high school season, if anything, it's going to have an asterisk next to it. I mean, quite honestly. So I think it's important for these players to really get geared up for summer and for fall, whether they're seniors that are graduating, getting ready to go to college and play, or for the ones coming back for another high school season. The summer and the fall is going to be even more critical than ever. And we want to make sure that they're, at their peak and as ready to go as possible. I don't think it's fair for a player to have to jump right into this season, and some of these college, or not college coaches, summer coaches are going to have these condensed schedules as well. And they're going to try to get in as many games as possible, especially with missing the high school season. And so it's important that pitchers maintain their program. Like you were talking about, make sure that they are on a specific pitch count, and that they're getting the proper rest between outings. And, I don't know if that means that summer coaches are going to have to load up even more in pitching. If they're trying to play 4 or 5 games a week, well, that's not what's going to be best for each pitcher with his development or for his health. So, we're going to try in this time that we have, like you were talking about, of maximizing themselves and making sure they're ready to get back into pitching shape with, the maintaining of the weight program, not necessarily like you were saying, getting stronger, but making sure they're ready to get up to their maximum potential as quickly as possible with conditioning.
Yes. And that's sort of what I was saying is I think this is going to be a time when coaches have to investigate when everybody's in front of them, when their pitchers they're ready to play, exactly to determine what their level is and what they're capable of, and allow those first games to act as where they're building their volume up. So like we were talking about, it may mean rotating the pitchers in a different way. But also to be extremely careful of, and that's the purpose of this show, because injuries occur at the beginning of a season, even when people know when the season's going to start. So trying to get pitchers to stay in the game and to stay safe. That's why some of the recommendations I made are really to keep their head in the game and to keep them on track, but also to start really realizing that their body isn't a machine and that it has to stay well oiled, but also too, it can't just produce if it's not ready to. Yeah, I think that's some really great input, Andy, and I really appreciate your being here to say all that.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me.
So I hope you enjoyed yesterday's recording, and here's my revised take on everything. So firstly, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm mostly concerned about reentry. And what I realized after listening to the coaches is it's going to be really important that every pitcher act as his own agent and that he takes self-responsibility for what happens when everyone is called back to the field. And that means in terms of where his arm is at, not being dishonest about it. Who knows if we're going to have a warning? Who knows how much time is going to be in between when they actually report and then they actually play their first game, whether you're in high school, grade school, whatever. And I think the most important thing is for pitchers to be honest about the condition they're in. Now, hopefully the plans I'm going to be offering you are going to help you be in the best condition you can be. But pitchers have to make a decision right now that they're going to make the best of this time, that even though not all parts are going to be in the same condition as they would like them to be in terms of your throwing, maybe even your hitting, your pitching, that you're going to do the best you can to be in the best shape that you can be. And the other thing that's going to be required on reentry is that coaches make a decision that they're going to be creative about the way they do things. If you have pitchers report or players report to the field for the first day and you have a game planned in 3 days, that doesn't make any sense unless it's a scrimmage and it's something that you can do in a certain kind of way. But it's going to require coaches to have open communication one-on-one, especially with their pitchers, to determine the shape that they're in. And again, pitchers, this is not a time to be dishonest about what you've been doing or what you did do or the shape that you're in. So I think it's really important to talk about what we can't do during this time. There is no way, and just get this in your head, that we can recreate the experience and the intensity of a practice or a game. There's just no way to do it. It's hard to do even when you're in practices. So, for example, a pitcher knows he can't recreate his intensity in a bullpen. So the workouts that I'm suggesting, since we're all sort of imprisoned in our homes, are really not to try and recreate. So you will think what you're doing is less than or a failure if you are thinking this doesn't feel like practice. And, you know, when I was speaking with Andy Tarpley, and of course, Andy is the head coach at the school where I use the mounds. He's mentioned a few times that that's what's the most thing he's afraid of is the intensity. Well, I want to look at this a little bit different way because we can't recreate the intensity. So let's think about it this way. We can't recreate the intensity, meaning the chemistry that you get. For example, I train in a gym every day. I'm training at home with dumbbells. I never feel like I'm really getting a workout in the general sense, but I know that each muscle is getting its workout because it's not the same when you're going from equipment to equipment. You're breathing deeply. Everybody's around. Everyone's training hard. It's not the same. If you are looking for that, you're not going to find it. And I can guarantee you won't find that, but you can't eliminate the things that you are doing hoping to find that because there's other things that you will get. So get that kind of clear right away. And in terms of how to match it, what I've come up with is a plan where you're not going to be matching the intensity of practices or games, but you are going to do the best you can to recreate the duration and the frequency with which you do something with your body. And that's the biggest mistake people make. They forget that, you know, baseball players are on the field usually 6 days a week. And so you need to be doing something 6 days a week. You're on the field after school without having eaten, and you're on the field for 4 hours without getting nutrition. So what we're going to do is recreate the duration, meaning when you do what I'm recommending, that you do everything back to back, but this time, since you're home, you can refuel in between things that you're doing. And again, you're not going to be able to recreate the intensity. So the main thing is that you give these ideas a chance. And guess what? You don't have any other choices. So I want everyone to wrap your brain around a different way to look at this time. And you do not want to waste this time. So here's some very important pieces of this. You've got to stay on track. during this time. We don't know how long this is going to last, but we do know it is definitely going to end. And when you are called to the field to show up for this wonderful quote unquote intensity that you love, you do not want to be dragging because you're not able to keep up with it because you didn't do anything. The better you do right now, the better you will perform once you do arrive at the field. You've got to keep your head in the game and use this time wisely. And also, this thing I know everybody is saying, don't drain your energy complaining. This is what's happening, accept what it is. It's no different than baseball. If the bases are loaded, the pitcher can't complain about it in his head. He's got to just deal with it so that it doesn't get worse than the situation he's in. So a baseball game, something you're really experienced at, is really no different than what's happening now. So keep your head in the game. And the last thing I'm going to say is, unfortunately, with many letters from coaches and everyone now, day after day, I'm getting my gym closed. Unfortunately, you're going to have some dumbbells. Now, I keep an array of dumbbells around all the time for situations like this or where I can't get to the gym. And you're going to have to order them and have them delivered. And there's no way to do most of this without a dumbbell. I do not recommend you're looking around the house for something you can hold that is not a dumbbell. The grip on your dumbbell is important. You can injure yourself if the weight load. So, for example, let's say you say, oh, I'm going to carry gallons of water around. Well, I don't like that. I don't like any of this modern stuff, of this creative stuff where people are pushing tires and doing this and that, because your hands and wrists as a pitcher are golden and you cannot be gripping unusual things. And a gallon of water has all the weight below your grip. So it's not what you think it is. And so maybe you could walk up the stairs with it, but you can't use it to do curls. You can't use it to do triceps. You can't use it for wrist because it doesn't activate the same way. We're all saving money on gas right now. Make one last investment before you run out of money. Pitchers, break open your piggy banks and give your money to your parents and buy some dumbbells. Now, I have an array, and I've been lifting weights my whole life. So if I'm in a gym, I may be on some exercises going up to a 50-pound dumbbell, a 55. On smaller exercises, maybe need a 10 or a 15. I have a 3, a 5, a 10, a 15, a 20, and a 25. Trust me, I get great workouts because there's ways of training where I can make that 25-pound dumbbell feel like it's 50 pounds because of what I combine that exercise with. And do not buy pairs because you have to pay for dumbbells by the pound. So anything you can do with 2 hands at a time, you can do with 1 hand at a time. So I recommend, unless you decide, no, I've got a bench and I want to build my gym, but to conserve on money, these are the size dumbbells you should have. And depending on your age, you may not need that 25. You may not need that 20. I mean, if you weigh less than 100 pounds, you don't need those weights. So I want everyone to know that, unfortunately, even though there are some things in my plan that will not require weights, for you to really use this time wisely, you're going to probably have to have some dumbbells. And if for some reason you only have a 5 or an 8, you don't want to buy more dumbbells, you're going to have to get creative and you're going to have to still do as much as you can to make sure that the muscle is responding in some way. So that's my tip, because I know people think they can get creative. What you're going to do first is you're going to decide, I'm going to give you a plan that's going to walk you through some things, and I'm going to tell you why we're doing it. But the first thing I want you to do is I want you to decide in advance, when are you going to do this? Now, most players report to the field. If you're a high school player, you're there at 2:30. Sometimes you're competing in the morning. Ask yourself, if you had a day where you could choose, which, by the way, you have that now. If you have a day when you can choose when you work out, you need to understand your own physiology. This is when we say, I'm a morning person, I'm a late afternoon person. I cannot train in the afternoon. to save my soul, I could not train in the afternoon. I have to train in the morning, and I have to train first thing. If it gets past 10:30 or 10, I can't even go to the gym. My head just doesn't, my chemistry changes, and then I know I'm going to get not a good workout. So I make sure that everything I have to do happens early in the morning. You need to check in with yourself, because guess what? You now have a choice, which you don't usually have. Check in with yourself so that you can maximize your energy with what you're going to do, because otherwise you're going to be dragging. And you might think, well, I'm dragging because this isn't fun, this isn't hard enough. But no, get your chemistry behind it. So make that decision, and you're going to do that every day. And then I want you, even though we can't create the intensity, we want to create, as I said, for you to be doing it for everything back to back, except for I do want you stopping, like if you're at home, walk into the kitchen, drink a protein drink, go back, but have that segment not be broken. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to have a drink, but I think I'm going to go online for half an hour. No, keep it that frame is your frame, with like dugout breaks, and then go back to it. And then when you're done, do all the things you have to do. So pick the time of day where you're going to be able to do that. Now, here's what a workout is going to look like. And this is something I want you to do. Well, let me say this. Let me get back to when you're going to do it, because there's something you're going to do every day. And I mentioned this, I believe, in the original podcast. I talked about priority training. So let me give you the order of how you're going to do things. And then I want to take each thing separately. And then I want to talk about how many days you're going to do what. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be making a choice on a muscle to priority train. I mentioned that in the podcast we recorded yesterday. I want to go a little bit more into that. Your first thing you're going to do during this segment of time when you've allotted for training is you're going to priority train. It's called priority training for a reason. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go outside and you're going to run. And I'm going to tell you how to do that and how to make your decisions. Then you're going to come back in the house and you're going to do incline push-ups. Pitchers, this is your best friend exercise. If you did nothing but this, you would be great. Now, I mentioned this yesterday. If you walk around in your house, you know what a push-up looks like, where your hands have to be. And guys, do not do the push-ups where your hands are turned inward or something crazy. And please leave both legs on the ground. And your pitchers, so you want to make sure you're not doing anything crazy with your hands. So just normal incline push-ups, meaning something like you're doing it against your kitchen counter, where your legs are way back and that the surface is cutting right underneath your pecs, right underneath them, just where you would come if you're doing a bench press. Now, walk around your house. So, for example, this is what I have. The highest angle I have is on my front porch. The next highest angle I have is on my kitchen. The next highest angle I have is on this little bar thing I have. The next highest angle I have is my dining room table. The lowest angle I have is my couch. So when I'm doing these, I start sometimes high, go to low. Sometimes I have one that just feels perfect and I just stay with that. Vary it, but get incline push-ups in. And remember, the way you make a muscle change, and we're not going to be getting stronger. This is another reality thing. Unless you've got, somebody who's going to sit on you, on your back when you're doing this, don't recommend it. You have to be able to tire the muscle out. And when it's fatigued, every rep you do after that is going to change what's happening inside your muscle. And what we need now is to rebuild some of the tissue that you trash all year long. So you're kind of training like a bodybuilder. So this is how you would vary it. Let's say you have an angle where you do it, you just are experimenting, and you can only do 5. And you go, whoa, well, that's a good angle. And then you're going to try to get 6 or 7. But let's say one day you go, oh, this higher angle feels kind of cool. I like the angle. Well, you might want to start with that lower angle, then jump over to the easier one and continue. So now you're getting more reps, but it's not as easy. That's kind of how we make a 10-pound dumbbell feel like a 20-pound dumbbell. putting something in front of it, then popping to another weight, where now your muscle's already fatigued, so it's experiencing that dumbbell as a different weight. So that's kind of how you can vary things. So walk around your house once you know about this and see what you're going to do. Then after your push-ups, you're going to lay down on the floor, and I recommend lying rotations. And by the way, everyone, on my YouTube, you've got nothing else to do. Scroll through my YouTube channel where I've got exercises where I put down my favorite elbow, the rotation exercise, because you're going to see a lot of exercises and things you can do. So the rotations on the floor, and this is when you lay down, you put your legs straight up towards the ceiling. They're vertical. Your arms are out at the T position, and you're rotating side to side. The reason why I recommend this, because you're using a lot of weight on the abdominals as they rotate side to side. They're, 2/3 of your body weight is in your lower body. So your trunk is down, but your legs weigh a lot. So when you do this, or you bend your knees and put a medicine ball in between, you get safe rotation. There's a lot of things on the market with throwing medicine balls and this and that. And the reason why I've never used those types of rotations are they're just too sloppy. And you see, I'm somebody who goes, well, you're a baseball player, you're on the field. Your moves have to, quote unquote, be a little sloppy sometimes. You can't predict how you're going to have to bend down to pick up a ball. That's why I believe pitchers and players, when you have the opportunity to train exactly the way joints are designed, then you can actually get some benefit. This is a great opportunity to actually fine-tune the feel you have with some of your body parts. So I think this is going to be great. So then you're going to do, after your rotations, now you're going to address your shoulders and your arms. So the shoulders and arms are going to need to be ready at a moment's notice. You don't know when that's going to be. You don't know when you're going to get the call, but you need to be ready. You know that you're not going to be ready with bullpens, pitch counts, when you last played catch, because who knows if you have a partner, can you get outside, can you have a mound? We're assuming that you don't have those things. If you have those things, that is gravy right now. But for every pitcher out there, you cannot afford, one, just the mental thing of not doing anything for your shoulders. You'll go out there feeling strange. Two, you'll have absolutely no confidence of how is my arm going to feel when I throw that first ball. Three, you have to take the responsibility to take care of yourself. So I want all of you to think about what you do to prepare for pitching, and hopefully you're all doing a great resistance band warm-up program. But you now, from here on out, will have no excuse. So I have what I believe is the best warm-up with a band program on the market, and this is the reason why, and I mentioned this yesterday. The first pitch strike program came into being after years of pitchers telling me how great it was. It came out in 2010 as a program. You'll see some guys on there that are actually in the minor leagues right now. It is a great program because it's scientifically designed. I am not a baseball player. I am not a pitcher. I am an analytical kinesiologist. So what I did as a part of my studies is to take every single movement in pitching and convert it to an exercise that matches the joint action, because that's what we think about, joints and muscles. And I designed this program. So it is throwing and it is pitching without throwing and pitching. So it's the best program. And what I'm doing right now to contribute, because I'm feeling the need to do something, is I'm making this available on YouTube on a private channel. And the thing you have to do is whoever needs it needs to email me, because I need to have connection with each person that I give this to, only because that's the way I'm keeping my head in the game. I love talking to coaches and pitchers. So I'm making this available. angel@gymscience.com. You email me and I will be getting back to you. I will want to talk to you. And then I will tell you about the resources I have to help make this indoor training better. But if you're not going to do that and you have a program that you think is really good, that's what you do next. And you're going to be doing that every day, as you're going to be doing the priority training every day. But this is the part of the whole workout. Now, if you have dumbbells at home and you're deciding you want to do, okay, so I also want to work out though. I want to do chest. I've got dumbbells. I want to do other things. Now you're going to do that. That will come at the end of all of this specialized stuff. So the order of this is put in order for a reason. And also, if you see, depending on how many of these things you can do, and the only thing you might have trouble doing if you don't have dumbbells is the priority training and the weights at the end. Everything else in the middle you can do. So if you go ahead and do these things in order, can you see how it's going to take a while? And before you know it, you have put in maybe a 2 to 3 hour practice. Now, I can't stress enough that the one thing baseball players do not get enough of is nutrition during their sport. I don't care if you're guzzling Gatorade or if you're chewing on bars. You have an advantage where now you come in from running, wipe off your sweat, drink a drink, let it digest, then go start your push-ups. You might say, gee, I didn't have enough. Then you go grab a bar. This is something you don't have the ability to do. And I want all of you to make sure that you're doing extra protein drinks, that you're letting yourself feel like you're staying in shape. Don't let the eating get you down because it'll make you pay in the end. So to repeat, priority training, running, incline push-up, rotations on the floor, my first pitch strike program or whatever it is you want to do for your shoulders. Do both arms at this time now, guys. And then you do your weight training after that. And this is how you get through the day. Now, let's talk about, before I go into the pieces, so priority training and your first pitch strike program are something you are going to do every day, regardless if it's a day where you do the rest of this stuff. For example, you're going to be running on your regular training day. Run as many days as you can. And when I tell you how to run, you'll probably be running, more frequently. But if your shoulders are killing you from the push-ups and your legs are killing you from running, you do like we always do. You take a day off or take 2 days off to recover. So this workout here can be done as frequently as you are able. But regardless of that workout, every day you're going to be priority training whatever muscle it is that you selected, and I will go into details on that in a minute, and you're going to be doing your band workout. So let's say, for example, every day you're doing, let's say you decide, guy, I can only run every other day. So you do the main workout, day 1. Day 2, you're back to priority training the one muscle you've selected and a first pitch strike program or whatever you select to do. Day 3, you're back on the whole thing, which already has the priority and first pitch strike integrated, and there you go. And in baseball, I know everyone takes Sundays off. If that's something that you feel like you want to do, go ahead and do it. And take that one day where you can just not do anything. But the main thing you want to do is, as I said, we can't recreate the intensity, but the closer you stay to something that looks like the main schedule, your body will respond, because guess what? You've already trained it to respond. You've trained it to be strong at 3 p.m. in the afternoon for practices. You've trained it to be able to handle an 8 a.m. game. So try to keep your head in the game that way. Okay, so now let's talk about priority training, which I absolutely love. So here's where the gift of this time can help players. So by the way, I had tons of pitchers who were on edge. They shouldn't have been pitching. These are guys that I don't work with all the time, but they're my long distance clients. So I become sort of their consultant and somebody they go to, or somebody who has flown in to see me and they're now away. So I've had many pitchers who had injuries, and we know injuries occur at the beginning of the season. That is why we want to try to offset that when our next season starts. They were calling and they're so excited because without either having to tell the coach they were hurting or waiting to get completely injured, a lot of them were pitching through pain. And what I said to them is, do not look this gift horse in disguise. So when you have when you're doing something that's called priority training, it's a perfect time. So you're going to make a choice. Priority training means that it's some muscle, one muscle that you need to grow or get stronger. It's something either you have injured it and it's never been right. It feels weak to you. There's just something about it that it feels weak. Or maybe, guys, it even can be, if you're not injured and you're not weak, it can be a visual thing. So, guys, if you feel like, hey, summer's here and my guns are small, well, you might want to make your biceps your priority muscle. But this is a muscle that you're going to select. The best muscles for priority training are arm muscles. So that would be wrist, forearm, biceps, or triceps. Pick one, and you're going to do something for it every day. So you'll only choose one exercise, and you will go through different exercises for it. Because if you were in the gym training normally, you would do your biceps, and you would have to do probably 4 to 5 exercises to hit it in every angle and with every sort of format to recruit certain muscles. If you did that every day, you couldn't train every day. That's the way we train when we train it, and then we take 2-3 days off of it, and then we go back. But you're priority training it, meaning every day I'm going to hit it with a different exercise, and you're not going to feel it the same way as you feel when you do 5 exercises. But trust me, and as I said yesterday, I've been doing this since the day after Lent. I decided I'm going to do triceps every day. They're a great muscle to prioritize because they're 2/3 of the upper arm. They have great response, and they're a great body part. So I decided to do something, and they can take a lot. By the way, they have more fast twitch muscle fibers than any other muscle in the body, and they are the workhorse. They can really take a lot. So what you want to do is, for me, I was just picking a different exercise every day, rotating through dumbbell exercises, push-ups with the narrow grip, different things. And trust me, you will know that you've trained your arm. You will feel the circumference of your arm change almost within 4 or 5 days. Something will feel stronger, but you won't get that deep soreness that you get because every time you change exercises, you recruit different fibers. So you're going to pick a priority training body part. It's going to be either your weak link, it's going to be something you're healing from an injury, or it's going to be something that when you look at yourself, you say, man, I need this to be bigger. Your forearm, your tricep, your bicep. I recommend arm muscles for priority training, and every pitcher needs better arm muscles anyway. So we will be rolling along if you do just the fact that you're a pitcher and you need more training on certain parts. And just to tell you, just a little list here, and I'm almost done. If you've injured your UCL, you need to be thinking forearm and wrists. If you've had medial elbow pain, you need to be thinking forearms and hammer curls for the outside. If you have shoulder pain, you need to be thinking about the rear deltoid. If your arms drop during your motion, you need to be thinking about the middle deltoid. If you have biceps that are sore after pitching, and especially after you release the ball, you need to be doing dumbbell curls or some type of flexor exercise for the bicep and accentuating the negative, meaning you would curl the dumbbell up and take as many counts as you can to lower it, because sore biceps mean you're decelerating either incorrectly or the bicep can't handle how hard you're throwing. Remember, my job is to get guys to throw harder. One of the things I learned early on is if I'm going to give them an ability to throw harder, I better build their bicep, because sometimes a sore bicep means your skill has surpassed your body's ability. And if you are sore on one side of your back, I cannot emphasize enough doing these lying rotations. So the daily plan, every day, you're doing your priority muscle and you're doing your first pitch strike program or whatever muscle you choose. They are already built into the full plan, which includes the priority training, running, incline push-ups, rotations, your band program, and then whatever weight program you're going to put yourself on. So the last thing I want to talk about is the running. And so you can choose wisely. So in terms of running, and this is something that I do with my guys all year long, but this is a chance for you to actually run appropriately. As you know, most of the time you're running when you've been practicing. So you're not really running full blown. And if you were training to be a runner, you would prioritize running. You would never put anything before it because you want full speed. So guys, as much as you are fast around the bases, trust me, you can be faster because you're not running bases right now, and you're not playing right now, and you're not swinging a bat, and you're not out on the field doing all the things you do. So if you're a pitcher that runs bases, this is a great time for you to get in shape. Also, pitchers, remember, you got to get to first base to cover it, and sometimes you have to be able to do that to second. Who knows what's happening? But you've got to be able to go from a mound to a base and know that you're able to run that distance in a good timing. And the way that you get those first start movements is by running short distance and having good first movements. So, and this is what I think for any baseball player, there is never a need to run more than hundreds. If you stay with 20s, 40s, 60s, and hundreds, you're going to cover, no pun intended, all your bases for what you need to play your skill well. Because think about it, 90 feet, 30 yards, that's base to base. You hit a double, that's 60, et cetera, et cetera. And for pitchers, if you're not swinging a bat, you do these to stay in shape, to keep your hips and legs in shape, which, by the way, are the hardest things to keep in shape when you're at home training. I mean, you can walk around the house doing lunges, but if you're a well-skilled athlete, it's not going to do much. But so I say, put your energy of your legs into your running. Don't even double it up. Just let running. And if you know how to do a 3-point start, this is the time to use a 3-point start because it hugely develops the hamstrings, the hips, and makes your runs feel awesome. So you're going to go out, and because you're doing this program, you might be doing it every day. You might be doing it 3 days in a row and taking a break. But if you're running, I want you to alternate through what you're doing. Think about it. If you're somebody who hits doubles, that's your style, then you know what distance you have to be able to run quickly. So run it on straightaway. So you're doing everything on a straightaway right now. So now you're doing strict training. You decide. So my pitchers don't very rarely go over 60s, and we work mostly with 40s. But sometimes, because I want them to blow out their engines, I will just let them go hundreds because it feels good and you're still within the same energy pathway. So you're actually developing your pathway. Lay out a calendar. Your priority training and FPS program is built into the schedule of the full workout. You lay out what days you're doing that. The other days, you know you're doing priority training and your band workout. Lay out on each day with the workout, decide, okay, this day I'm doing 40s, this day I'm doing 100s, this day I'm doing 20s. Try to use a 3-point start if you know, and then there it is. You have the best that you can be doing. If you do something like this, and get creative with what I've suggested, but I recommend that you do not get creative with eliminating priority training. It is a beautiful thing, and anybody who lifts weights knows it. And you might, after 4 sets, say, oh, well, this isn't enough. Well, you're priority training that body part. So if you decide, okay, I am going to do more than one exercise, they're kind of combined. And I don't suggest you do that till you've done only 1 set per day. That's okay too. But that is a muscle. That is the muscle that when you return, you want it to be different. So make a choice to have one thing about you be different. And if you do that, you do the band workout for both shoulders, and again, I recommend mine, you will be the best you can be when you return. And that's really all that we're asking for right now. So I thank you for listening to this last segment. I'm so glad that I decided to add this in. And I think I'm going to just right now thank all my guests again because they were fabulous. And I love when I'm inspired to go deeper into what I'm thinking about. So I thank them for that and for giving their time. And please use me as a resource during this time because I am here for you. And thank you for listening.